In this video, we're going to continue along our new task of using internal style sheets instead of our inline CSS. So just to recap, we were looking at using CSS. We have been using CSS where we would use the style attribute and then we would have quotation marks. Then we say our selector, colon, and the value. Selector being what we want to change and the value being what we want to change it to. So in the case of this H1 tag, we are changing the color of the text in the H1 tag to brown, right? So then we started looking at internal style sheets where instead of putting the style attribute directly inside of the tag, we would instead declare the tag, open a curly brace, and well, close it at the same time so you don't forget to do it later on. But more importantly, put all of the CSS, the same selector value pairing inside of those curly braces, and whatever tag we declare would inherit those styles globally in the document. So we wouldn't have to go to every P tag and say that the style equals color, gray, and font family, Arial, etc. Right? And then this would be a global tag versus targeting an element specifically. So I added some comments just now. Comments in CSS are the slash, the forward slash, and a star, and then you put all of your comment text inside, and then you end it with a star and then the backslash. All right. So that is, or yeah. Sorry, sometimes I get my slashes mixed up, but essentially the first one leans forward and the other one leans backward, all right? So that is how you get a comment in CSS. So once you're inside of the style tag and you want to leave a comment, that is the syntax, and the same keyboard shortcut applies. So once again, this would be declaring styles globally for our P tag, and then this one would be defining a style for the element with the ID header. So remember that we have ID tags or attributes that we give to our tags. So here we have a div with the ID being header. And if we wanted to style this particular element, then we can just say hashtag the ID, and then we proceed to declare all of the styles that we want. So let's just take a quick preview of what we had so far. So I'm just right-clicking the file, saying open with live server. And here we see our page that we've been working on. So this was the header section, and it had the H1 tag, which has the style to make the text brown. But the header, let me just bring back up the syntax so you can see. Our header had the background color to be this shade of gray, the text align to be center, and the padding to be 20 pixels. And that's exactly what we see on our page. All right. So what I'm going to be doing for this video is taking all of these style, the CSS that would be specifically put into the style attribute so far. We're taking all of them and we're migrating them into our style tag so that we have it globally. So if we have to change it, we can change it one place, one time, and it will be applicable to the entire document. So I'm going to start with a container. So I want to move the styles for our container div into the internal style sheet. So firstly, I need to know what element exactly am I targeting. So these styles were put into the div with ID container. So I'm just going to say hashtag container because I'm calling it by its ID. And then I'm just going to take all the CSS out. So I'm just going to highlight in between the quotation marks. I don't need the quotation marks. And I'm going to cut. And then I can just paste it inside of the internal style sheet. It doesn't really matter that it's in one line, really and truly, because I still have my selector, I have my colon, I have the value, and I have the semicolon. So that's the most important part. Just make sure you have that format. You could write everything in one line, or you can break them into multiple lines. I think that would be easier to read if we do it that way. All right. So now that we've made a representation for the CSS inside of in the internal style sheet, then I really don't need my style attribute inside of my div tag. All right. Now let me do that again for our H1. So I had H1, the style should be color brown and the font family is Arial. But then I think I want every H1 tag in this document to have this style. So what I'm going to do is just define H1 as the tag, open and close curly braces, and then now whatever I put inside of here will be applicable to every single H1 tag that is on my page. I have no problem with that really. So I'm just going to take all of the CSS, cut, paste inside of the style sheet, just make it more readable by breaking the line, and then back in my H1 tag, I'm going to remove that style. Now I'm just going to scroll through the rest of my document to see if there's anything else that I want to move out. There are times when you may still want to use the style. So in this case, I have the IMG. I'm going to leave the style attribute there because I'm just setting the width and the height. That might not be the global style that I want for every image. So in this situation, I'll leave it. So on a case-by-case basis, you may want to make it global. So like I want every H1 tag to look this way and every P tag to look this way. And then under certain circumstances, I want to target a particular element and make it look those like that, or have those styles. That's fine. But then on a one-off chance, maybe there's a particular element that I just need to look a particular way. While I can give it an ID and reference it up the top, I can also still do this. So I'm not saying one way is the absolute way to do it and the other way is wrong. I'm saying that know how to do it and use it according to your context. All right. The last one that I'm going to change though is the ID footer, and we gave that one a background color of aqua, and I'm probably going to do a bit more for the footer. Let's just take a look back at what the footer looks like, and you see, okay, so the footer, I'm going to give the footer some padding, just like how we gave the header area some padding, and I'm going to center align all of the text inside of this footer. All right, so going back to the code, I'm going to take the style out of the footer. So I'm just going to remove all this code and then go back to my internal style sheet. And I'm just going to go underneath container. So the order doesn't really matter in terms of footer versus container versus header. The fact is it's reading from the top to the bottom of the document. So the only way the order really matters is if I declared some conflicting style for a p tag later on. So if we're setting the color to be gray at the top, and then down here I forgot I set it to be gray up the top and I set it again to be blue, then all the p tags will come out blue because the last or the bottommost code is going to override the topmost code. All right, so that's where order matters in terms of setting this up. So for the footer, I did say, well, I copied the code or cut it. So the background color is aqua, and then I'm going to give it some padding. So padding basically says that the content that is inside of this container, give it this amount of space from the borders. All right, so remember how it looked before. So let me just show you how it looks before the padding. So I'm taking out padding and we look at it, right? So you see all the content is right on the border. Now when I introduce padding and look at it again, you see that it moves right away. You saw it move before your very eyes, right? So that's what padding does. So this is a padding of 10 pixels. And once we say padding, it just sets the padding top, bottom, left, and right automatically. All right. So the padding is 10 pixels. And then I'm going to text align and put every bit of text in the center of this div. And so that is how our footer now looks. All right, so you see it just wrote it one place, one global place, and then it just falls in line. So I didn't have to make my HTML tag look uglier by putting in more and more CSS. So that's another thing. You want your code to kind of look clean. So you want to keep all the CSS one place and all the HTML one place. And for me, it's easier to maintain in the long run. Now let's continue with some fun. So we sorted out the header, we sorted out the footer. We can do better. Colors aside, we could do better, yeah, sure, but that's not the objective just yet. We're still learning, we're still looking at examples. But right now, I want us to transform the section for our nav into, a little better looking nav area, right? So I do have a div dedicated to the nav. And this div dedicated to the nav has the ID nav. So anything I want to do to that container or the elements in that container, I just call on nav. All right, so let's start that. So I'm going to go back up to my CSS section. I'm going to introduce hashtag nav. So I'm targeting the element with the ID nav, and I'm going to give it a background color of, let's say, light blue. So let's take a look at what the colors that Visual Studio Code has to offer. If I look at all these colors, I see that they have quite a few colors and shades and suggestions of colors. The fact though is that you cannot find every color here, and not every color can be called by name like this. So if I wanted burgundy, if I start typing burgundy, they don't have burgundy. If I wanted burgundy though to be my color, then I would need to find the hexadecimal code for burgundy. So when I want a particular color or a particular shade of a color that I really don't know, and I don't sit down memorizing hexadecimals and the list doesn't have it, I find this website colorhexa.com, right? So I can just type in maybe burgundy. So burgundy is not the color I want. I'm just using burgundy because it's not listed there. So I search, and then they find burgundy and they tell me, some details about the colors. I'm not really a color connoisseur, so I don't really commit those to memory. But later down, they show us the hexadecimal code, they show us the RGB code, and they also show us HSL and some other codes, right? So the fact is that once we get this hexadecimal code, which is hashtag, and that's what, 8020 or 80020, I can take this hexadecimal code and then I can go back to my CSS and I just say background color and then put in the hexadecimal code, and then it will know that this is burgundy or whatever color it is that I'm referencing, right? So if the color is not listed, and I actually suggest that you either use the hexadecimal or you use the RGB format. So it's either hexadecimal or RGB. Those give you some levels of precision that the names may not give you. So even if you hover over Visual Studio Code's color name, you'll see that they're telling you what the RGB for that color is anyway. All right, and even if you change it, they're going to give you the RGB values anyway. So RGB would be red, green, and blue. So the numbers here range from 0 to 255, right? So 0 being, I believe 0 would be black, right? So all zeros would be black, and 255 would be white, right? So if you want white on the RGB, just say 255, 255, 255. If you want black, it's 000, and then any combination of values between 0 and 255 on the R value, the G value, or the B value, red, green, and blue, then you get the different shades in between. All right, so I'm going to just reset everything here to aqua as it was before. I changed it, right? And so for our nav, I'm not actually going to use burgundy. I'm not using burgundy as a color. I just thought that that was a teachable moment, but instead I want a color called light blue. So I'm actually just going to say light blue. But in keeping with what I'm suggesting with using the RGB, I'm actually going to take the RGB, change it. So you can actually just click up there and you see it change to the different modes. So that's RGB. Then I can change it to the hex, or I can change it to the HSL. All right. So I'll leave it as RGB. So we have one example here where we're using the word. We have another example here where we're using RGB. And earlier we had an example where we're using hex. So you have three different examples of how you can implement colors in your CSS. The next thing I'm going to do after setting the background color for my nav is give it a padding of 10 pixels. So I'm just going to say padding 10 px. And then when we preview that, I'll just go back to my page, you can see, so the light blue, and then you see that there's now some spacing between the words or the links and the borders of the nav bar, right? So that's what the padding does. Now I'm going to take this CSS thing to another level. What if I wanted to change the way the anchor tags, so note in the code we had nav, we have a div called nav, a div with the ID nav, and then we have anchor tags inside of this div. We do, however, have anchor tags in other places on our page. So I do have an anchor tag here that I used as the example for a link to Amazon, right? That's an anchor tag. I could have other anchor tags maybe in the footer and other places, but I don't want all the anchor tags to look the same because I want the anchor tags in my nav bar to look different from the anchor tags anywhere else. So in CSS, I can actually specify the container, which in this case is nav, and then specify the tag inside of that container that I intend to target. So let me go through that again. I have an element called nav, which is a div, which is a container, and inside of this container called nav, I have a few anchor tags that I want to apply some CSS styling to. Now, it would be easy enough for me to go through and say style equals in each one of them, but then you can imagine how tedious that is if I have 5 anchor tags, 5 navbar links, and I have to do style equals and specify that style 5 times. And then if I forget to change one, then I have to go and do rework. That would get annoying, it's not sustainable, and it's not efficient. So using my internal style sheet, I can set a more global thing that I'm saying, give me the container called nav. So we already did that here. We know we can target the container with the ID, right? But then I'm now extending it to say, give me all of the anchor tags inside of this element called nav. And then I can set a style or a few styles right here that would be global to all of the anchor tags. So if tomorrow I get up and I decide that I wanted another anchor tag in this nav bar and I introduced another one, it would automatically inherit the style that was already set. All right. So just so that we can see the differences, I'm going to first start by saying the color of the anchor tags in the nav bar, I want them to have azure. Right, so I'm just working off a previous example that I did. So don't mind the colors. I'm just using colors that we can see the exact difference when we look at it. So remember that by default they were blue, and then now I'm saying that I want them to be azure, and azure looks more white than it looks blue. So you can visibly see that they're white. They were blue before and they're white now, or they look white now, right? And notice that the other link that's on the page has not changed. Once again, that's because I said I wanted the anchor tags inside of my nav div, which is represented by this light blue strip. Those are the anchor tags that I wanted to change, not every single anchor tag on the page. All right, so you can set a global anchor tag style, or you can say, give me the anchor tags inside of this specific container, or you could give each one an ID. Well, each one would have to have a different ID, and then that would get tedious because each anchor tag would have to get a different ID, and then you would have to specify each ID up here. So, sometimes you just want to work smarter, not harder, and CSS makes it very easy for you to just work smarter. All right, so another activity, and I just added some comments so you can, pause the video, read through the comments, and hopefully they can help cement the concept a bit more. But I'm going to continue with changing the look of the links. So I don't want my links to have, not the navbar links at least, I don't want them to be underlined, right? So I'm going to call a selector called text-decoration, and then I'm going to say none. Right, so text dash decoration could be used if you wanted your text to be dashed, dotted, line through, solid. Each of these do something differently. So if I say wavy and we look at it, then nothing visible happened at least. If I said line through, let's say line through, let's see what that does. You see, so it's now struck through, right? So that's what the text decoration does. It allows you to modify how the text looks. So I'm just going to say none. I don't want any form of text decoration, and so there's nothing special about my text in the nav bar, or rather my anchor tags in the nav bar. So continue to style the anchor tags. I'm also going to tell the anchor tags that I want them to have a padding. But before I do that, let me just comment that out and let's take a look at the space that these tags are really occupying. So if I right click and go to inspect, once again, this tool allows me to look at the element and the space it's taking up on my page, right? So if I look at the anchor tag, you see that it's taking up just that highlighted area, home. That's all the space it's taking up. And if I hover over any one of them, that's all the space they take up, right? However, if I go to my code and I say padding, and I want all of my anchor tags to have a padding of 10 pixels right around, and I go back, you see that there's now a bit more daylight between the home and the next element. And if I look at it, you see that it's now taking up a bit more space inside of this nav container, right? So it's now pushing the elements a bit more away, and because I don't have any visible borders, it's not like you can see that the content is being pushed away. But then look at this, because I'm changing the padding on the anchor tag, it's like I'm making a bigger portion of the area around it clickable, right? So let's look at that again. Let me just take off the padding, right? Removing the padding. This is it before. Now look at this. The mouse is near home, but it's not clickable until I'm directly resting on home. See that? I have to go right on home for it to be clickable. However, when I give it the padding, so I'm just redoing the code that I just wrote, right? And I give it the padding, and yes, you see it gets a bit bigger, but then look at how much of the area around home now becomes clickable. So because of the padding, it's now saying, okay, all of the area between the word home and where an anchor tag would end, given the padding, all of that is now clickable. All right, so we could probably even increase that padding, but I'm going to leave it alone for now. And so that is our navbar modification up to this point. Now I'm going to show you one more thing on this topic, and then I'm going to call this video a success, because I don't want to do too much one time, but I want to show you one other thing that you can do when you're doing internal style sheets. So we have the anchor tags, we have the navbar, we give it a distinct background color, and we say, take up a bit more space. We modified our anchor tags to look a bit different from the regular anchor tags on our page. If you want, you could text align them. So all you would have to do here is just say text align dash is center, and it would center align all of the tags in the navbar, all of the links in the navbar, sorry, but I don't want to center align them. What I want, however, is that when I hover over them, the background color changes a bit, right? So I'm going to add this as a bonus section, all right, with some comments, so you can pause and look at the comments and you can read through it. But essentially, the code I just added was the same nav. Basically, I took the same hashtag nav, the same anchor tag, but then I'm specifying a behavior on the anchor tag. So I'm saying in the nav bar, whenever you see an anchor tag, or in the nav div, where you see an anchor tag, if you get a hover action on it, hover means that the mouse just moves towards it or lands on it, then change the background color of this anchor tag to be blue. That's all we're saying there, right? So once again, any anchor tag that is inside of an element with the ID called nav or the ID nav, when something hovers over it, change the background color to blue. That is what that code is saying. So after putting that in, we can go and preview, and we see that it works, right? So that is how people kind of make nav bars. And back in the day, you'd have had to write some amount of JavaScript to accomplish this. Now with CSS3 and this modern development pattern and set of features, we can actually just do all of that from inside CSS. All right, so now my navbar actually starts looking more like a navbar, and I have a header section, I have a subheading, that's fine, and then the subheading is an H2 tag, I believe it's H2, so it's H3, and I have some H2 tags throughout. So what if I wanted all of my H2 and H3 tags to have a particular color, right? So I can actually specify more than one tags to have the same style. So I defined H1. Any H1 tag should have a color of brown, and the font family of Arial. That's fine. But then I want all the H2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 to have a different color and, well, still have the same font family, right? So I can actually just say H2, comma, H3, and for as many tags as I want, I can just comma separate them, use my curly brace, and define one style. So right here, I'm saying that all H1 tags should look this way. Here, I'm saying all H2, H3, H4 through 6 tags should have whatever style I'm about to write here. So if I want all of them to have a color of, let's say, I saw one that said maroon, right? So it will look similar to brown, but it's not quite brown. Brown is H1, maroon is the H, every other H tag, and they all should have the same font family. So I'll just copy that font family, paste. So after doing this, let's take one look at our page, and then you see this. So this is our brown, this is our H1 tag, this is an H3 tag, this was an H2 tag, and every other H2 tag on the page now looks like that with maroon and the font family of Arial. All right, so that's a nice primer. I think that's a nice way for us to look at internal style sheets. Of course, practice will make permanent. So now that you have this new technique, anytime you want to write a style, just develop the discipline that you're going to come into your style sheet, whether you're going to write the style globally or you give that element an ID and you write a style for that particular elements with its ID. And in the next video, we're going to start looking at using these styles on other pages as well as developing classes in CSS.